السلام عليكم أيها السيدات والسادة. Shalom حافرين بحافرات. Peace be upon you, ladies and gentlemen. أهلا وسهلا. Welcome all. Thank you all for coming to be with us this fine day. My name is Samir Bitar. I have the honor and privilege of being chair and presenter for this panel. It's titled Perspectives on Islam. Before we start with our first speaker, I would like to take time and thank the Central and Southwest Asian Studies Center, the World Affairs Council, the Russian Studies Program, the Department of History, the Department of Modern Classical Languages, the Office of the Provost, and the Office of the President for all their support in bringing this conference to the University of Montana. Most of all, I would like to thank the community in Montana and specifically Missoula area and the surrounding people for coming here and participating, attending, and engaging with the ongoing conversation. With no further ado, my co-presenter today is somebody I have come to know over the last year. She is taking Arabic language and cultures at the University of Montana, and she is very experienced, very knowledgeable, and she was very kind and courageous to join me in this panel. I know her as Jannah, that's her Arabic name, and that means heaven. And she has been a pleasure to have in class as a student, as a friend, as someone that can really contribute to the learning process. With no further ado, please help me give a big hand to Jane Borish. Jannah.
Good afternoon. As Professor Bitar has stated, I am currently a student in the Arabic language class 101 and 102, and this has segued into an interest in Middle Eastern studies and politics. Let me say at the outset that Professor Bitar has no idea what I'm about to say, and so there should be no shame on him for whatever I happen to say. How, you might ask, did one such as myself come to be in this position speaking to you? I'm still somewhat asking that question myself. What qualifications might I possibly have to speak with you? When I thought about this, I guess my main qualification is that having been a fairly long-term resident of Montana, 15 years, that I converted to Islam 3 years ago in Montana. And on that rests my meager qualifications. I'll pause right now for a minute so that anyone who wants to leave can do so, because I don't consider myself a scholar. I would consider myself a fairly well-educated person, a believer in lifelong learning, but not a scholar. I must say that I have been very reticent to discuss my path to Islam with anyone, and there are 3 reasons for this: Montana, Montana, and Montana. Actually, Montana is only one of those reasons. Another of the reasons is that the attitude toward Muslims and Islam in the United States since 9/11 has been unconscionably bad. I am as well a shy person and tend to be reticent about discussing such things. And I must say that only recently did I happen to tell some very long-term friends that I had converted to Islam. I wrote my perennially late Christmas letter, and in it indicated that I had become Muslim, and put after that in parentheses, but I'm not a terrorist, close parentheses. I am happy to say that the response was very kind and accepting from all of my friends. So at this point, what I would like to speak about briefly is the perspective, how this perspective can change hugely for one small person. But I must say that looking back, I have been appalled at, saddened by my own level of ignorance about Muslims, Islam, and the Middle East. Years ago, I realized that there was a large hole in my knowledge, but I was working single parent and had to make a mental note and push it off to the side at that time. I will have to admit, if I must be honest, that my idea of a person from the Middle East was that the image from the movie True Lies of those little terrorist guys. And I knew that I was prejudiced. I do recall, however, in my high school days, seeing the film Lawrence of Arabia, and Omar Sharif was quite impressive. Never occurred to me to ask whether he might be Muslim. Perhaps I should give you a little bit of my background. I was raised as a Catholic in a small, very pretty town near Pittsburgh, which was, however, bigoted and provincial. From Catholicism, I learned a strong sense of morality and had a good experience in terms of spirituality earlier on. However, I ultimately left Catholicism in my late teen years because of the hypocrisy which I could no longer accept. I spent a number of years as an agnostic and then began to feel a more clear presence of the divine around the time, definitely at the time of the birth of my first and then second child, which, despite my knowledge of exactly how a child is formed within the womb, seemed like a miracle when it happened. Through the years, I thought of myself as very fortunate. Now I would call that blessed. I thought that during those years that what happened to me was lucky coincidence. Then I had kind of a bonk on the head sort of epiphany that made me realize that there was something else out there. There actually seemed to be an unseen friend. And so I began to ask for spiritual guidance. At about this time, I was working in an emergency room, and very commonly at 2 in the morning, we would have these very frail people come in who were going downhill quickly. We had a succinct way of describing them. We said that we had one swirling the drain. And when I would speak to these people and say, do you really want me to resuscitate you? Put in tubes, pound on your chest, break ribs, shock you, the invariable response would be, "What? Are you trying to tell me that I'm not healthy?" And these were people who had had just about every limb replaced, multiple cardiac interventions, pacemakers, automatic defibrillators, and had not considered that one of the 2 greatest events of their life was soon to happen. And I resolved from this that I did not want to have this happen to me. And so when I got the first opportunity, I got the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying and read that. And I'm kind of a how-to person, do-it-yourselfer. But when I got through this book, I realized this is not a how-to book. This is going to take a little bit of work. But I still did not have a clear spiritual path. And also coincident at the same time, my son had given me the Dan Brown novel that was very popular. It was called Dan Brown, The Da Vinci Code. And that led to an interest in the history of the origins of Christianity, and that segued into an interest in ancient civilization. But I began to realize that there were many questions that had been unformed in my mind, but had been there for years, that had not had answers. And I must say that when I was a child, there seemed to be an unspoken taboo about the whole subject of Islam. Questions didn't come up, and and for one thing, the Catholic Church did not consider it a real religion. And in any case, in those days, if you weren't Catholic, you couldn't go to heaven. Now, remarkably, that has changed. Now we know the Catholics say that anyone who lives a good life can go to heaven, and I find it remarkable that this change has come about not by divine decree, but by change in human attitudes. And that, at least, is a fortunate development. But some of the questions I began to wrestle with were, what is the divine? And what happened to God the Father in Christian religion? We learned about this God in first grade. Who is God? God is the maker of heaven and earth. Where is God? God is everywhere. But that was the last I remember hearing about this craggy old gentleman on the top of the Sistine Chapel. And it seemed very strange, and questions kept coming. Could God have a child? Would God want to have a child? If God had a child, would God agree to cruelly sacrifice a child on the cross? And how about vicarious redemption? Is it really possible to have someone die on the cross and have all your sins forgiven? Are we not all responsible for our deeds? Is it possible to confess at the end of a life of heinous crime and say, I believe, I confess, I'm sorry, and have it all forgiven and go to heaven? I don't ask you to answer these questions. These were simply questions that I was wrestling with. At that time, was it coincident? A friend happened to give me a book about Sufism that was a very small, terse, pithy book that had a rather secular approach to the subject. It only dawned on me after I got well into book that somehow Sufism was related to Islam. And this book really resonated with me. And so I began to study more and realized that I must now clear my knowledge gap about what was Islam and who was a Muslim and who were these people. And that led to further study, to reading the Quran, and ultimately then 3 years ago, I took the Shahada, which is a declaration of faith for a Muslim. It was a very special time. I was very elated. This happened at a retreat in Southern California. I had developed a network of spiritual friends who are like-minded, and so it was a very significant event, and I was coming home to Libby, Montana, having gone through the Spokane airport, and I was now driving back through northern Idaho, feeling extremely elated, but it suddenly hit me, oh my God, what have I done? And I must have been intoxicated. Well, I was spiritually intoxicated, but it dawned on me that I was coming back to Libby, Montana. There are many beautiful people in Libby. It's a phenomenally beautiful place, but it is a staunch, conservative, and in many ways very closed-minded place. And so that was a large reason why I did not excitedly return to Libby and tell all my friends, hey, I just became a Muslim. However, I realized that in some way I had given Libby the distinction of having a demographic vital statistic added, which was that it probably now had the largest Muslim population in northwest Montana outside of Missoula by virtue of having me. Now, I haven't done the actual statistical analysis. I've just thrown that in for the humor value. So, about a year or so later, maybe a year and a half, I ended up moving to Missoula, Montana, because I now had a grandson and had offered to help with my grandson here. It was difficult to leave such a beautiful place, and my fruit trees and bushes, but I realized it was meant to be. Because here in Missoula, not only did I have my grandson and family, I also, very incidentally, found out that Arabic was being taught at the university. I had never expected this, hadn't looked for it. Thought I would have to go to California if I ever wanted to do Middle Eastern studies, and here it was. And so with great trepidation, I signed up for the Arabic 101 class because I had already resolved that I would, and had begun working on a project to read every word of the Quran in the original language and begin to understand it. And this has been a very opening experience. It certainly has amazingly opened my horizons. And so I would like to share with you some of my perspectives and my insights because of this. First, I find that I have even much more empathy with all people who live in situations who have beliefs which are wholesome but which are outside the accepted cultural norm. I have even more empathy with people of color who don't have the opportunity to be discreet about their racial presentation. I am amazed to have had such a blind spot in my knowledge regarding Islam and the Middle East, and I must now search for other unrecognized blind spots which I may continue to have. I also had the realization, going to Turkey about a year or so ago, that I am spiritually connected with the 99% of wholesome Muslims who try to follow the message of the Quran, which is a reminder, even a reiteration of what are basic Christian values, to be humble, kind, and giving. However, I realize that I have a cultural isolation because I was not brought up in the Middle Eastern culture. I realize that we are, in the end, all products of an egocentric evolution. That is, that we must relearn virtues of selflessness and sharing, and that this requires work. Truly, to be a real Christian or a real Muslim requires a lot of time and energy. This makes me recall a quote of George Bernard Shaw, who said that Christianity is a very difficult religion. That's why there are so few true Christians. One might say that to some extent of Muslims. We all have a great deal to overcome in order to truly, sincerely express the faith. The last and overwhelming perspective is that, however, being a Muslim in Montana pales in comparison to the many times and places where other people with different views have had a much worse time. For example, as a Coptic Christian or even a Muslim living in a village which is now being occupied by ISIS, with the psychopathically brutal form of Islam that they profess. That's all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jannah. Shukran jazilan. Assalamu alaikum again. That means peace be upon you. It is the Muslim greeting, which symbolizes actions of the Islamic faith. What you're looking at is a picture of my family. In the US, I'm Samir Bitar. It's customary to ask people, what's your last name? So I'm fully functional with the first and last name. Where I was born and raised in the holy city of Jerusalem, my name is Samir Ibrahim Mahmoud Ali Ahmad Al-Bitar. Legal name in the Arab world is 4 names. Our names reflect our lineage. Samir is my name, Ibrahim is my father's name, Mahmoud is my grandfather's name. Bitar is the family name. This is my mother's side of the family. I come from a very large family. My mother is one of 12. My father is one of 14. So I have several hundred first cousins. I was raised on Mount of Olives in the Muslim tradition. However, my family is a large family. As you see, this is only the Palestinian contingent. Bitars live in all of the Levant, and there are many all over the world. Our family includes Muslims, Christians, and Jews. We belong to all the three monotheistic religions. The majority of us are Muslim. I show this as a Palestinian and a Muslim. My grandparents, they are in the center. They are illiterate, but I learned a lot from them. Grandma always said, religion is the way you treat others. Grandpa always said, no coercion in religion. Don't guide those that you love. God will guide those that seek him. The next generation, my aunts, these are maternal aunts and uncles. Only my youngest aunt has a college degree. Now we come to the young, the third generation. I am in the picture and I am the youngest. So I ask you, where is Waldo? The generation you're looking at, they're sitting, kneeling. All of them hold a master's degree or higher. So you can see in 3 generations, we went from illiterate to PhDs. Because we realize education is the only path to resolution and peaceful existence. By now you realize I usually use a mouse. This is the nucleus family. Our youngest is not included. Where is Waldo? I'm on mommy's lap. My name is Samir and she is Samira. Arabic is gender sensitive, so we have masculine and feminine forms of nouns and adjectives. I share this picture because it brings sad moments to me. The home that this picture was taken in, I was on Mount of Olives and in Jerusalem with a few U of M Grizzlies last summer. And I went to visit the home where this picture was taken, but the home is no longer there. All I saw was a pile of rubble, demolished. What you will see in the background is a picture tour of the holy city of Jerusalem. I am, as I already stated, Palestinian by birth and experience, American by naturalization and experience, and most of all, and closest to my heart, I am Montanan by experience and residence. I was born and raised in the Muslim tradition on Mount of Olives, east of Jerusalem, to Palestinian parents. I received my basic education at St. George, British school, run by the Anglican Church. My classmates were Muslims, Armenians, Assyrians, and Christians affiliated with various Eastern church groups. Thus, a multi-religious, multicultural, and multi-ethnic society. My wife of 33 years, and allow me to take a moment to thank my wife for all her support and love and for putting up with me all these years. She is native Montanan, raised in the Catholic tradition, born in Fort Benton. We have two lovely children who were born and raised in Montana in a multi-religious, multicultural, multi-ethnic home. As Americans, our diversity is one of our greatest strengths. My experience here, humbly, combines all of the above and more. I am proud to be an American, and I'm very proud of my heritage. Islam is an Arabic word that is derived from a three-consonant root that means peace. It is also translated as submission. That is, submission of the self to the teachings of God, Allah, in order to realize personal peace within and with one's existence on earth. The true message of Islam is to find peace within the self, within yourself. You align yourself with all that God loves and stay away from all that God, Allah, does not love. This peace within the self shall permeate from the individual to the family, friends, and the society at large. Allah is the proper noun in the Arabic language for God. This Arabic noun is very unique because it does not have a plural or a gender. It is the noun used by Arab Jews, Arab Christians, and Arab Muslims for God, the one and only. The following are names of God in different languages. God in English, of course, Allah in Arabic, Yahweh in Hebrew, Dio in French, Dios in Spanish, Kut in German, Dio again, Italian, Khoda in Persian, Theos in Greek. I mention this because at many times I hear people say, oh, they worship a different God. His name is Allah. Muslims, like Christians and Jews, believe in the one God, the one and only, the creator and the sustainer of the universe. Thus, Islam is not a new religion. At its core, it conveys the same guidance and message that Allah revealed to all the prophets He sent mankind. I will quote the Holy Scripture, Quran, chapter 3, verse 84. Say, we believe in Allah, in what has been revealed to us, and what was revealed to Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, and their descendants, and in the books given to Moses, Jesus, and all other prophets from their Lord. We make no distinction between one and another among them. And to Allah we surrender ourselves. Quran, chapter 3, verse 84. Muslims also believe in angels, heaven, hell, and the judgment day. Islam, amongst the monotheistic religion, combines the original and the final revelation of God of Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad. To worship Allah is to know Him, love Him, and act upon His guidance in all aspects of life to serve him by serving mankind. The Quran, chapter 2, verse 177. True piety does not consist in turning your faces towards the east or the west, but truly pious is he who believes in God, the last day, the angels, the revelation, and the prophets. And to spend out of your sustenance, out of love for him, for your kin, for orphans, for the needy, for the wayfarer, for those who ask, and for the freeing of human beings from bondage. To be steadfast in prayer, and renders the purifying dews. And truly pious are they who keep their promises whenever they promise, and are patient in misfortune and hardship. And in time of peril, it is they that have proved themselves true, and it is they who are conscious of God. Quran, chapter 2, verse 177. Now I'd like to talk about the 5 pillars of Islam. The first pillar is the declaration of faith. To bear witness that there is none worthy of worship except Allah, and that Muhammad is his messenger to all human beings till the day of judgment. The prophethood of Muhammad also obliges the Muslim to follow his exemplary life as a model. The second pillar, prayer. Daily prayers are offered 5 times a day as a duty towards Allah. They strengthen and enliven the belief in Allah and inspire man to a higher morality. They purify the heart and prevent temptation towards wrongdoings and evil. The third pillar, fasting the month of Ramadan. The Muslims during the month of Ramadan not only abstain from food, drink, and sexual intercourse from dawn to sunset, but also from evil intentions and desires. It teaches the Muslim love, sincerity, and devotion. It develops a sound social conscience, patience, unselfishness, and willpower. Again, I would like to talk about grandma. When we were little and we started fasting, the first thing I heard from grandma is, Samir, come here. I said, yes, grandma, can I kiss your hand? She goes, yeah. It's customary to kiss our grandparents' hands and forehead. I said, yes, what did I do? She goes, fast your tongue. Fasting is mind, spirit, and soul. It is not just about not eating or drinking. You need to fast your tongue and don't think ill of anyone or anything. So fasting really teaches willpower, discipline. It has many benefits. And there are many medical studies that show that it's actually good for us as far as our health, to cleanse the system. I challenged all the high schoolers when I go and talk to them if they can fast their tongue. The fourth pillar is zakat, which is to pay annually 2.5% of one's net worth. And this money is collected to be spent on poorer sections of the community. And here I'd like to point out that it goes to anyone and everyone in the community, irrelevant of what affiliation they have. The fifth pillar is pilgrimage to Mecca. It is to be performed once in a lifetime, if one can afford it, financially and physically. Allah, God, judges us on intent. This is very important in Islamic belief. And what I mean by that, pilgrimage is demanding financially and physically. So the condition is there for every Muslim to perform pilgrimage once in a lifetime, if they can afford it. And here the word afforded is associated with their physical ability and their financial ability. The annual pilgrimage in Mecca can have anywhere from 2.5 to 4 million people. It is the largest congregation on the globe. So it is very crowded. The rituals are physically demanding, and you have to have the money to travel, lodge, buy presents to bring back. So back to the intent. Let's say today I intend in my heart truly to go to pilgrimage this year. But for whatever reason, God forbid, I move on to the next world. In the meantime, I get credit for the pilgrimage because it was an intent, a pure intent in my heart. Actually, I spent 8 years in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and before leaving, I contact my aunt. I have lots of aunts. This is what my wife from Montana loves. We've been to 14 countries, 22 states, and everywhere we stayed with a cousin. All I have to do is call Central, that's Mama in Jerusalem. I go, okay, Hajjah, we're heading to London. In the next couple of days, I get a call back. Cousin Aida, Cousin Omar. Okay, we're going on to Amsterdam. Okay. Cousin Layla. We're coming back through Chicago. Cousin Kanaan. We might go to New York. Cousin Farid. So we've been blessed with free room and board everywhere we go. And the first year we were married, she didn't have to cook the whole year because we were invited to all the cousins. And she was so alarmed when she came to join me in Riyadh, the capital, because 30 plus of my cousins came to the airport to meet Samir's wife. You know, Islam is a religion of peace, compassion, equality, reason, and justice, all of which are not adequately represented in our media. Prophet Muhammad advocated equal treatment of males and females. He encouraged education from the cradle to the grave. Veiling and seclusion was never advocated by Muhammad, peace be upon him. He encouraged men and women to dress modestly. And Islam was the first religion to guarantee a woman's right to own property and receive inheritance. And with all the love and respect, Christianity followed it 1,000 years later. Now there's a big question that everybody asks. Is Islam tolerant or intolerant of other religions? You know, despite the recent examples of ISIS, the Taliban, and various clashes between Muslims and Christians in Pakistan, Indonesia, Nigeria, Sudan, historically, Islam has an extended record of tolerance over the centuries. The Quran unmistakably and formidably states that, quote, there is no compulsion in religion. Chapter 2, verse 256. And that God has created many nations and peoples. Many verses in the Holy Book emphasize the diversity of humankind. Chapter 49, verse 13. O humankind, we have created you male and female and made you nations and tribes so that you might come to know each other. Muslims, like Christians and Jews, believe that they have been called to a covenant with their Creator, and collectively they constitute a community of believers intended to serve as an example to other nations. Quran, chapter 2, verse 143. Quran, chapter 3, verse 110. Muslims also regard Christians and Jews as people of the book, people who have received scripture from God. The Quran recognizes that the three Abrahamic faiths, the descendants of Abraham, share a common belief in the one God, in biblical prophets such as Moses and Jesus, in human accountability, and in a final judgment followed by eternal reward or punishment. Quran chapter 2, verse 62, quote, "Surely the believers and the Jews, the Christians and Sapiens." Sapiens is a term for Middle East groups traditionally recognized by Islam as having a monotheistic orientation. "Whoever believes in God and the last day, and whoever does right, shall have his reward with his Lord, and will neither have fear nor regret." In the Quran, the Muslims are directed to protect the people of the book, namely the Christians and the Jews. At this time, I'd like to switch gears and share with you some of my personal experiences as a Muslim in Montana. I came to Big Sky Country at age 16 as a freshman in college. That was 40 years ago, but I'm still 28. I don't count the time I'm sleeping. It shouldn't count, okay? It shouldn't. We're just sleeping. So I was born into a Muslim family. However, I grew up in the holy city of Jerusalem, where the three monotheistic religions are practiced and the affiliations are diverse. Being Palestinian, while our national plight resided in the forefront of our identity, religion was and is secondary. I spent a lot of time with Palestinian Muslims and Palestinian Christians alike. Growing up in the old holy city, I often visited the Church of the Holy Sepulchre with my Assyrian childhood friend, where we knelt next to Jesus Christ, the real place, and we lit a candle. And the father, I come from a very, let me say, humbly affluent family. My family settled in Jerusalem in the 12th century. And the priest knows. He goes, "You're the Bitari boy, you're the Muslim boy." I said, "Yes. Can we light a candle for Jesus, please?" And he will light the candles and do a prayer. And then me and my childhood Assyrian friend would leave the Church of Holy Sepulchre and go to the Aqsa Mosque and wrestle on their fine carpets. They have fantastic carpets. We did that until the groundskeeper came and said, "All right, boys, it's prayer time." And we ran to Grandma's house. My family has 3 homes in the old city, and one of them is just right outside Al-Aqsa Mosque grounds, which is a way we can show our settling that part of the world way back in the 12th century. I arrived in Havre, Montana at age 16 in the fall of 1974. Soon it dawned on me that I am a Muslim and everyone else is a Christian or not. A thought and a feeling I did not experience growing up. I was the only Muslim in the community I live in. However, at the time, in the 70s, religion and Islam were not part of the American discourse like they are and have been since 9/11 and the wars that followed. As I started to make friends and socialize, the subject of religion came up. And the most common question, if not the question, how do you feel about Christians? For me, Samir, given the way I was raised and my association with Christians all my life, the answer was easy. 1, religion is between you and your maker. It's very private. It only goes bad when you try to give it to another. 2, in Islam, we believe in all the prophets, starting with Adam to the completion of the message with Muhammad, peace be upon him. 3, Muslims believe in all the scriptures before the Quran revealed to Moses and Jesus. 4, in the Quran, Muslims are directed to protect the people of the book, namely the Jews and Christians. 5, Islam builds on the 2 monotheistic religions that preceded it. Thus, I am at peace with Christians. Today, I can say, ask my wife, she's Catholic. One of the first, if not the hardest experiences, was when the fasting month of Ramadan arrived. I grew up fasting, and I'm not sure how to go about it now that I am in Havre, Montana, which my mom calls the end of the world. Where's Samir? He lives at the end of the world. Okay. So I called mom for guidance, and she said, quote, Samir, when a Muslim is in a faraway land, he is an ambassador, and you would make a great one. May Allah be with you. I will guide you through the month. What comforted me more and gave me confidence in my belief in faith and strengthened my relationship with my Maker, Allah, was I received great news from the cafeteria at Northern Montana College, that's what it was called at the time, that I can start working with them. With that, my food to break the fast was already in place for me to carry out the worship. I say that because the logistics of having the meal to break the fast at the end of the day would have been rather complex if I didn't have direct access to the food when I needed it. Allah is truly with me. He facilitated my job that brings the food and I in direct contact, resolving the logistics of trying to break the fast when I need to, and mom is going to guide me. What proved to be awkward was the interaction with classmates and friends with whom I assimilated and developed certain routines and habits like hugging, kidding, laughing, smoking cigarettes between classes, etc. Well, now it's Ramadan, and I'm not smoking. So when they inquired why I wasn't going out for breaks, I answered, hey, look, I'm trying to cut back, okay? Next came greeting and hugging, which, if one is fasting, hugging the opposite sex is disastrous, for it will break the fast. Thus, I developed a cold. Sorry. I'm a bit under the weather, so we best not hug or get close. Well, you know, this got old fast. So after a week of making excuses and avoiding close contact, I shared with all that I am fasting. My friends thought it was neat, and a good number of them shared with me why the Pilgrims came on the Mayflower and how the freedom of religion is part of the US Constitution. That made me feel great and sparked my interest in learning about the Constitution. To sum up what I have shared thus far, I can confidently say that during the 70s, being a Muslim in America was not an issue at all. and the reception was pleasant, since the community at hand wished to learn about Islam, not question it, like it is today. In comparison, and what was an issue and highly controversial was talking about Palestine, since the community, and here I have between quotes, much like the rest of America, had already taken a position on the issue. This to me was highly flawed. Since they were exposed to only one side of the conflict, namely the Jewish plight, along with utter disregard to the Palestinian plight. Another very important factor that greatly affected the attitude and responses of the community then in reference to being Muslim versus Palestinian was and is the question related to Islam came after the community members met me, got to know me, knew about me from others, and thus viewed me for the human I am, who happens to be Muslim. When it came to being Palestinian, the human factor was not there because the media in the US constantly dehumanizes the Palestinians. They are portrayed as either refugees or terrorists. And most of all, the inquiry came with a preconceived position and attitude. Thus, it proved to be very controversial and caused me to be very disheartened by this general attitude I had to deal with. The way Islam and Muslims are viewed today is not what I experienced when I first came to Big Sky Country. It is hostile. Thanks to all the negative media and biased representations of Islam and Muslims to the American populace. In the meantime, I was learning more about the Constitution and the American way. So I exercised my right to my opinions and shared with all that their position towards Palestine is un-American, since they only know one side of the story. And such an attitude, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, falls under the definition of prejudice. So that was the 70s. Late 70s and for most of the 80s, the question changed from are you Palestinian Muslim to are you Iranian? To which I responded no, emphatically. And with all true honesty, having people come up out of nowhere, at random, asking me was very disturbing. Aside from being an American, however, it enabled me to develop further understanding of the following statements, which I hear constantly as I travel around the world. 1, American democracy stops at their borders. 2, Americans seem to have a double standard. In the 80s, I moved with my wife, who was born in Fort Benton, to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, where I worked as a civil structural engineer on projects for the royal family. There, I experienced a much different Muslim community from the one I was raised in. This brings up a very important concept for all to try to understand. Islam, the revelation message, is one. However, Muslims are very diverse. The formula here is Islam, a constant, plus a given culture, which is a variable, will give us a result, which is groups of Muslims, and the result is also a variable. And it highly depends on the culture it resides in. That said, for a non-Muslim to understand Islam, he or she needs to study Islam, not Muslims. Analogous to the view I just articulated would be someone studying a certain offshoot group of Christians, extremists, like the KKK, and conclude that, okay, all Christians and Christianity are like that. When you look at a very, very small fractional percentage of a given group of people, like 1%, less than 1%, and then ascribe that to the other 99%, that's not logical, reasonable, or American. There's the formula. And the point I'd like to get across from that is if one wants to understand Islam, then one needs to study Islam, not Muslims. There are 57 Muslim countries. There are 1.6 billion Muslims. And a Muslim from Jerusalem is not anything like a Muslim from Xinjiang province in China, or Chechnya in Russia, or San Antonio, Texas, or Calgary, Canada, or Mexico City, okay? Because the constant message of Islam is being integrated with a given culture. And then the result is variable. Islam is constant, it's one message. Muslims vary, interpretations vary. So to study a special, some Muslim tell me, oh, the Muslims in Afghanistan do this. Well, those are the Muslims in Afghanistan. That's not Islam. In the 90s, the American discourse was focused on Saddam Hussein and Yasser Arafat. Islam and religion was not an issue. It's very intriguing how the American discourse over the years, and I've been here 40 years, flip-flops. In the 70s, are you Palestinian? In the 80s, are you Iranian? In the 90s, are you Iraqi or Palestinian? After 9/11, it became more or less all of the above, plus, are you Muslim? Followed by, are you Sunni or Shia? You know, these questions being fielded and coming across with a negative attitude. Comparing this to my initial experience when the inquiry was genuine, I would say the inquiry now is fairly hostile. And it is not motivated by curiosity, but rather hidden biases and lazy misconceptions, accompanied by a preconceived position and attitude. Everything changed after 9/11. It's okay to badmouth Muslims. In America, it makes me very sad, very disheartened. It's un-American. In America, it's not okay to badmouth any group. So Islamophobia and badmouthing Muslims all over the United States is not acceptable. You know, at 9/11, I had a business here in Missoula. And I went to my store, and my neighbor Gwen came. Sammy, you see the news this morning? I said, yes. I'll be in the back room in my store. I was, of course, very worried for myself, my family, and my business after watching the reaction and all the things that took place to Muslims and non-Muslims all over the U.S. However, I'm blessed to be in Montana. I didn't want to answer the phone. I didn't want to look at my email because I was expecting bad things. However, in my store, I was in the back. I told the hostess, I'm in the back. I will only see employees or family members. She came, Sammy, your friend from the janitorial company wants to talk to you. I told him, you are in the back. He insisted. I said, okay, have him come to the back. He came. He said, Sam, I want to tell you, I love you. Is your family okay? I want to reassure you that you will be fine. Let me give you a hug. And that went on for the rest of the day. Many of my beloved customers came to the back. With that, I answered the phone. It was the principal from the high school where my son attended. Mr. Bitar, don't worry about your kids. we're looking out for them, only to be followed 5 minutes later by the next principal. I empowered my children when they were in middle school to make all their decisions. So they went to do different high schools. Each principal called me. I opened my email, and it was full of emails from friends over the years from Montana and all over the globe inquiring as to our well-being. I have a good friend, I call him my cowboy friend. His name is Wade, and he's an undersheriff. He called me and said, Sami, don't worry about your store. We have a second patrol car looking out for you. So this is the love that I and my family received in Missoula, Montana. And I am a Montana product, and I'm very proud of it. And I have all the confidence in the peoples of Montana. I will close by saying the following. As Americans, we need to exercise the freedom to build a just society. Justice is the great work of human beings on earth. Kindly wage peace to preserve values of the spirit for future generations. Please get informed. With a wealth of information available at our fingertips, we can read and view a variety of news sources and studies which will help us develop a more rounded perspective on the issues at hand. I urge you all to speak your mind with motivation, purpose, and direction in more than one tongue. But most of all, exercise your critical thinking. Find the courage to think outside the box, and close your eyes with me and imagine global harmony. Thank you very much. Before we go on to the Q&A, I would like to take a minute to thank my co-presenter. Please help me in giving another hand of applause for Jannah. We have a microphone over there. Please come up to the mic and feel free to ask any question that you might have of me or Jannah, and we will do our best to shed light on your inquiry.
Okay, thank you for your presentations. I sit and wonder, in all of our different religious faiths, we have leaders that appear, and I'm referring one just to our Pope and to the Catholic religion. Do you see on the forefront that there may be a charismatic Islamic leader that could come forward and unify with the Islams and have a little bit of peacemaking ability with all the different types of Muslims that we have?
Thank you for your question. I think that's very much needed. I believe it's a moral obligation of all literate members of any society to contribute in mentoring and understanding and negotiating their life. I believe it is a moral imperative on Muslims worldwide to act, to counteract these groups who have broken every rule in the book and hijacked the message of Islam. The responsibility, first and foremost, resides with the Muslim nation. And of course, only Allah, God, knows the future. But I have full confidence in the ability of moderate Muslims to rise and work against this terror that has ailed humanity. Next, please. That's next in Palestinian dialect. Next, please.
Shukran jazilan li antum. My question is for those of us that are curious and interested in learning more about a number of issues: Islam, Palestinian experience, Islam in America, general, history of the Middle East. Where would you suggest we start? Where can we go from here?
We can start right here at the beautiful University of Montana, our home. We have access to a lot of experts, resources, and to follow world news, you can go to the website refdesk.com. That's REF desk.com. You can access any newspaper in the world in any language. I recommend you always triangulate. So if you see a piece of news coverage on primetime US TV, try to watch the same on BBC. If you are a polyglot, read Le Monde, Le Figaro, read the French and German press. Again, we go back to the internet. You can go to linktv.org. They have a special program called Mosaic, and it covers the Middle East. So you will get to see news right from the area: Israel, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Jordan. So as the American expression says, get it from the lion's mouth. Okay. One of the issues we have is all the media coverage that really hazes all the lines between culture and religion, and they bring everything without context. I'm a language teacher, and I always tell the students, at the end of the day, context rules, okay? And I thought one time to make bandanas for them that say context. So every time we look at each other, that's what we see. That is very true, okay? There's lots of resources. So make sure you get your information from several places. Use your analytical abilities and critical thinking. And most of all, formulate your own opinion. Don't take sound bites from primetime TV. We have time for a couple more questions.
Shukran again for presenting. This is a question for Jane. I'm wondering how your elementary understanding of Arabic has influenced your study of Islam.
I think mainly it has made it much easier to understand the reading of the Quran in terms of not only vocabulary, but parts of speech, order in the sentences, idiom. So that has greatly facilitated it. Also, just in general, with the cultural presentations in class, which were unexpected and added a really nice dimension, it has led to a greater stimulus in terms of just general Middle East study of culture and who are these people in these different countries and what do they believe and how have they been influenced. To the question about how does one learn more about Islam and Muslims in America, in terms of books, a really nice short history of Islam is No God But God by Riza Aslan. And it gives a very nice history of how the colonial powers have affected the development of the different Middle Eastern countries, which was something that was a real eye-opener for me. Another book in terms of Muslims in America is Moving the Mountain. I can't quite remember the name of the imam who wrote it, but he was the imam of Ground Zero. And you may recall that there was a tremendous outrage at wanting to build what was termed a mosque at Ground Zero. How appropriate. However, it wasn't a mosque at all. It was a community center. And all of that uproar was over a multi-faith community center. So that book was also enlightening. I hope I answered your question.
Shukran, Jannah. Actually, what's playing in the background is pictures from our visit to Jerusalem. We have several of our students who went to Jerusalem in attendance. I have the honor and privilege to serve as guest lecturer at the Center for Jerusalem Studies. And I've traveled there the last 2 summers, and I've had students from the UM join me. And with no further question, I would like to thank you for being great listeners, and may the Lord be with you. Allah ma'akum, ma'as salama.